Good afternoon, Facebook. My next live workshop, Alignment in the Voice, is coming up in Natick, Massachusetts in the middle of March, and the early bird registration is ending this week. So I wanted to hop in and give you guys sort of a sample of the type of stuff that we're going to get into and why alignment matters so much when it comes to the voice. So I wanted to talk with you today about the concept of forward head posture, which many of you know, and you see it in your students. You can see that the head is pretty far in front, and we know that that's happening a lot these days when we're looking at devices, right? We're looking down all the time. We're sort of just in this position a lot in our bodies. So I talked to you about a couple kinds, sort of two varieties of forward head positioning, and sort of what the upshot of that is in the body and why we need to address it. So the first kind that you might see is just that the chin is kind of slid forward. So sort of this, if I turn to the side, you can see it's this sort of thing. Now, if you take two fingers, you're going to take your middle finger and put it right below the base of your skull. And you are going to then slide your chin forward and feel how that space kind of compresses down on your fingers. Now, as you repeat that, see if you can sense what's happening in the front of your neck. See if you feel the tension that that generates. I can feel it pretty easily. So sometimes if you have someone come into your studio who says, oh, the front of my neck is just feeling really tight, have them put two fingers right into this space, this sort of soft space right below the base of your skull, and think about, without really changing the position of your cervical spine, can you slide the head forward and back a little bit and see if they can find a place where you don't feel the compression in the back and the tension in the front lessens as well. So that's sort of one way to deal with that. If there's no squeeze in the back, no tension in the front, you've probably got a pretty good head position for them. Now, the other type of forward head position that might be, I think, a little bit more common is addresses the flexion in the neck. So extension is akin to back bending, and flexion is sort of like forward bending. But sometimes if you've got a curve, a lordotic curve that's going inward in the body, the way it is in the cervical spine, if you lose that lordotic curve, you have flexion of the neck going on. So it's a loss, in this case, the flexion of the neck is a loss of that natural curve that we should have. And we see this as the ears sitting pretty far in front of the shoulders. And there's a great image from an Eric Dalton publication that talks about how every inch forward adds 10 more pounds of weight on the spine of the head. So if your head is like 12 pounds to begin with, it goes forward 1 inch, it's added to 22 pounds, and on and on and on. Now, when you have this happening, when you have this forward head posture, you've got neck extensor muscles that are struggling to hold your head up. And the pull of those muscles is what's going to flatten the natural curve, the lordotic curve of your cervical spine that should be there. You also have, your head is sort of forced to backbend. It has to hyperextend on the spine. And what that does is shorten your suboccipital muscles. And these are the muscles that help to keep your eyes level. So for many people, when we finally get their head in a good position and they're aligned, you actually find that your gaze is down and you have to work very gently to just raise your eyes a little bit. You'll find it very fatiguing. But if you get your head aligned and you're like, oh, look at that, I'm actually looking down rather than straight ahead, it's because you've had some adjustment going on of these suboccipital muscles that we need to address. Now, what's the upshot of this forward head posture that so many people have? Well, you can have up to 30% loss of the vital capacity of your lungs. Now, that is because you've lost the cervical curve, and this loss of the curve is going to kind of block the action of the muscles that are going around the hyoid bone, right? We're going to talk more about the hyoid bone in just a second. But particularly the inferior hyoid that's lifting the first rib and the anterior scalenes, when you don't have good function in those muscles, you simply aren't able to breathe as well as you should be. Another really interesting upshot of this forward head position and loss of the cervical spine curve is that often you'll find that someone, and this isn't the type of thing that you would normally think to ask in a voice lesson, but someone might comment on it. And if you come to work with me, we might talk about this stuff. But they frequently have kind of a sluggish gastrointestinal system. So their digestion is sluggish, and that means that their evacuation is also going to be sluggish. So that's sort of another interesting connection that you wouldn't really think of, right? Jaw tension is also going to be impacted in there. So at the center of all of this, in the front of the neck, is the hyoid bone, right? It's our only bone that's in there. And it's the hub of all of these muscles that are connecting sort of the top of your sternum and your chest up to the jaw and the base of the head. And of course, our larynx is suspended from this hyoid bone in the front. So it's really going to impact the voice. And often the focus of addressing this head posture is to look at the neck and the shoulders. And you can have, people talk, and I always say, you can think about having a million double chins, and you find it. I like the idea of if they can visualize where the hyoid bone is or feel it, this idea of sliding the hyoid bone back. Some people like to talk about the alignment of the ear over the shoulder as being a good way to judge whether the head is forward or not, but your shoulders are a little bit of a moving target, right? They're not going to be totally still all the time. So another way to do it is the zygomatic arch, the sort of indent under the cheek, down to the sternum. And I think we want no more than 3 centimeters of difference. So if you have a huge differential of space, you'd have to have someone stand to the side. And I think this is a little bit more complicated to measure, so you don't need to measure that way. You can visually, you're just going to see, oh yeah, your head is pretty far in front. So as I said, the way of addressing it is often to talk about shoulders and neck and what's going on there, but we really need to look down the chain all the way to the feet, because the spine is going to follow what's sort of coming underneath it. So this is the type of stuff that we get into, and this is why alignment matters so much, that you cannot shove a body part where it's supposed to go and expect it to just stay there, right? So we could ramp the head back till the cows come home. It's not a bad activity. You'll find that there's some pull. You'll feel the tension in the muscles in the back. But we've got to start by getting your feet and your legs and your hips and your rib cage all in the right place, and then we can really see what we're working with. So this is what we do in alignment in the voice. We're going to I'll talk to you a lot more in depth about why alignment and sort of what it is and why we do it. And then we're actually going to put your bodies into alignment, and then we're going to move, because really the way to shift what our habits are to build new habits through movement. And I think just about every single person who comes to work with me, and myself included in this, we are not moving enough. And so we need to find ways of moving that can shift. And I want to give you ways of moving in the studio that you can incorporate into what you're already doing. You don't need 20 more minutes. You don't need 30 more minutes. You don't need a whole other hour with someone to explore this kind of stuff. So I'll put the link to register in the comments, and feel free to hit me with any questions. And I hope that I see many of you there. I think there are still 8 or 9 spots open. I do cap it at 13. And yeah, just let me know what your questions are.